Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone.
My guest today is my longtime friend, Charles Powell. Charles is one of my 6 friends I asked to be my pallbearers when I die. Charles is a longtime activist against war. Charles is also a longtime activist for the rights of working people. Charles gave me some years ago 2 of my favorite documentaries. Sir, No Sir, about the many U.S. soldiers in the Vietnam War who protested the war and helped to stop it. And this is on YouTube. Sir, No Sir. It's also available on DVD through interlibrary loan. And the other that Charles gave me was Vietnam, American Holocaust. I think it's the best documentary on the Vietnam War, narrated by Martin Sheen, and the film is by Claiborne. Charles was head of the local chapter in Albuquerque of the national organization Veterans for Peace. Veterans for Peace. Charles was head of that organization here for years, possibly 10 or 12 years. Charles, I thank you for being my guest today. And you brought along many of your writing. Yes.
Well, I want to thank you, Don, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to express some of my feelings
Good.
about the past and the present.
Yeah.
The present is very, I find it very alarming
I do too.
and disturbing.
Yeah.
And I cried after our recent election.
Yeah.
I knew there was a chance that this person might get elected.
Right.
And the polls were showing it was going to be close. So I was bracing for that.
Yeah.
But for him to win so big
Right.
is very, very disturbing.
Yes, it is.
And so I cried. I am a crying man.
Good.
I
wish that could be said of all men.
Yeah.
We need our tears.
I do cry when I feel things so strongly.
Sure.
That I do cry. One of the disturbing things nowadays is what's happening in the Middle East.
Oh, yeah.
In particular, in Gaza,
Yes.
to the Palestinians. It's just awful.
It is.
And
it is.
people refer to it as a war,
Right.
but it's actually not a war.
No.
It is a genocide.
That's right.
It meets the definition for being a genocide when schools, houses, hospitals, clinics are being attacked. There's no way around it.
No.
What the intent is,
Sure.
and it's not good. And the very worst thing for us is that it's our weapons being used.
Yeah.
And we continue to send more weapons.
That's right.
And they're used for this awful purpose. And we need to stop it.
Yep.
And that's one of the things that Veterans for Peace is working on at the present time. Our local group is very small. We need more members. And you don't have to be a veteran in order to join. We are mainly military veterans that have served in the U.S. military that have concluded that weapons and violence is not an answer to problems, and many times causes many more problems than it solves. So we're very much against violence and weapons. But we do need more members. We're losing members to death as we age. I'm 81 myself, and we're having trouble attracting younger veterans. But like I said, you don't have to be a veteran to join.
Now, if somebody wants to join, how do they get a hold of you or somebody else?
You can get a hold of me by calling 505-271-9274. That's my personal cell phone.
Right. And repeat it again, please.
It's 505-271-9274.
Good.
And I'm Charles Powell.
Mm-hmm. How many chapters does Veterans for Peace have across the country? Any idea?
Well, the last number that I knew about was 120 chapters in 48 of the 50 states.
Well.
And they're all struggling with membership and with finances. So if you want to help, you can donate to the organization. We have a mailing address at the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice, which is 202 Harvard Drive, Southeast. That's 202 Harvard Drive, Southeast.
And the zip?
87106.
Okay. Good.
So thank you for allowing me to talk about that. Like I said, the big issue nowadays has to do with what's happening to Palestinians and being done with our weapons, with U.S. weapons.
Billions of dollars of weapons.
Yes. That money could do so much to help us in this country. Like my understanding is that we could wipe out hunger in this country if we took that money and used it for that. But when increased spending is proposed, the response is so often, we can't afford it. But yet we can afford these horrible weapons.
That's right.
Yeah. In the Air Force, I was trained in electrical power production, which was working with diesel powered electric generators. And after getting that basic training, I was assigned to a Titan intercontinental ballistic missile launch crew, where I received more training on how to supply the electric energy for missile sites. And so that was how I spent most of my time in the Air Force, was working in these underground missile sites.
You were in your 20s, I suppose?
I was, yes. I joined at 18, and I got out at 22. And in 1962 was probably the most tense time. There were other occasions where we thought we were going to get the order to launch our missiles, but the most tense time and the time that I remember the most is during the so-called Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right.
And we were no longer thinking if we get the order, we were thinking when.
Really?
We really expected to get the order. And now I cringe that I never hesitated
Right.
about being a part of this. Like, we were trained of what those nuclear missiles would do.
But it didn't quite sink in.
Well, I didn't hear any of my coworkers
Really?
question what we were trained to do and what we were prepared to do.
And all of your families, mothers, dads?
Right. Now, I did think about that, like, I thought I would survive because we were in these underground fortresses.
Right.
And so I expected to survive, but I knew the world wouldn't be the same.
Oh, no.
And I also figured, like, most of my family was in Chicago.
Right.
And I expected that Chicago would be on the Soviet list of
Sure.
places to strike.
Sure.
And so I was thinking I'll never see my brothers and sisters again, or my parents. They would be gone when these missiles were launched. But it wasn't until recent years, being a part of Veterans for Peace, I started to think about that I never questioned what I was willing to do.
How do you explain that?
I don't, except that the military concentrates on getting young men.
Oh, yeah.
That's their prime target for recruitment, are these young men at an age where they do what they're told.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They do what they're trained to do. And
did the other young men that you were there with, did they show any fear or any questioning or any? No.
No, we talked about getting the order, and we expected to get the order, and we were ready to do what we were trained to do. Yeah. Now, I wasn't trained to actually push the button.
I see.
We had officers that would do that. A launch crew consisted of 5 men. We didn't have very many women in the Air Force back in those days.
Right.
This was 1962, and the 5-man crew consisted of 2 officers, and they were the actual people that would push the buttons. And then we had an electrician that was to ensure that all the connections and all the equipment was in working order and so on.
Or Holocaust.
Yeah. And then we had 2 power people, and I was one of the electrical power people. And our job was to ensure that there was enough electric power to launch these missiles. And it did take quite a bit of power because we were in these underground fortresses, and the control center itself was below ground, and that's where we were. And then we had 3 missiles that were, and I can't remember what the distance was, but they were some distance away from the control center, and they were underground. And to launch them, we had to open these huge, heavy doors to the missile silos.
Right, right.
And these missiles had to be raised to ground level and locked in place before they could be safely launched. Not like today, where they launch them from underground. They don't have to raise
really?
the missile to launch. But those days, this was the Titan I, and they had to be raised and locked in place, and then they could be launched. And of course, we had drills where we went through the motions of launching so that we would raise our missiles and lock them in place.
Do you remember any of your coworkers who questioned any of it? Really?
I don't remember anyone ever question what we were being trained to do.
Insanity of them.
Yeah, and of course, in those days, the Soviet Union was, well, it's much the same nowadays too, where even though the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore, we still make Russia our number one enemy. True. And we're constantly saying things and doing things to make them the bad guy and to make us afraid.
Right.
And to make us support the idea of having horrible weapons.
That's right.
And possibly using these horrible horrible weapons.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's really horrible. But like I said, it was during this Cuban Missile Crisis where the U.S. had discovered that a missile had been installed on the island of Cuba, which we had already been trained to fear,
right,
and to picture as a bad guy. You know, we made Castro one of our main enemies.
Oh yeah,
and the fact that he had made friends with the Soviet Union.
Right.
Because we refused to help.
Yep.
And he needed help from somewhere.
Sure.
And so he made friends with the Soviet Union and accepted help from the Soviet Union.
Right.
And so he had allowed the installation of this missile. And we found out about it, and the U.S. mistakenly believed that that the missile hadn't been armed yet.
Really?
But of course, years later, we learned that it had been. And so we didn't have the time that we thought we had to launch our missiles against the Soviets, and that it would be a while for their missiles to get to us. But in reality, it was a foolish belief that we had more time than we really had, because Cuba is, I think, 90 miles from our shores. So it would have been a big mistake. But luckily, both President Kennedy and the Soviet leader, Nikita Khrushchev, talked it out.
Yeah.
They both understood that destroying the world deserved to be thought about and talked about.
No winners in a nuclear war.
Exactly, yeah. And so they were able to work out a plan where we agreed to remove missiles from Turkey, I think it was, which was very near the Soviet Union.
Sure.
And they agreed to remove their missile from the Soviet Union. But before that agreement, it was a very tense time because there were Soviet ships taking at least one additional missile to Cuba. And the U.S. found out about it, so they were sending ships to intercept that Soviet ship. And the advisors on both sides were advising to use our missiles. So on our side, on the U.S. side, the advice from Secretary of Defense McNamara was advising Kennedy to launch. And the head of the Strategic Air Command, of which I was a part of, our missiles were under the Strategic Air Command, or SAC, S-A-C. I was a SAC-trained killer.
Right, yes, yes.
And we were ready to follow orders. And had the order come, I would have played my part.
Well.
And even though I knew, what would happen,
the consequences,
and I knew the world as we know it would be gone, I never questioned it.
Amazing.
And like I said, it's been recent years after my involvement with Veterans for Peace, where I tried hard to understand the young men that were given guns and sent into the bush to kill Vietnamese.
Right.
I tried hard to understand why they didn't question those orders.
Yes.
And some of them did, as you pointed out. This movie, Sir, No Sir, tells about not only the demonstrations against the war, but some of them actually refused to follow orders. And some of them actually deserted.
Yeah.
And some went to jail as a result of their resistance to war.
Good.
But
heroes of conscience, and I heard on NPR just the other day that in Israel there are some young men who are refusing to go murder in Gaza.
Yes. Yeah, they in Israel have an organization, Combatants. Well, it amounts to Combatants for Peace, which is very similar to Veterans for Peace. And so our national organization has communicated with them and worked with them on some projects. They have visited New Mexico, and
really?
While here, Veterans for Peace did meet with them and so on. So we share many of the same goals and so on. But back then, in 1962, I never questioned what I had been trained to do.
Right.
And so had the order come, I would have followed
Were
orders.
you ever awakened at night saying, be on the alert? Because
there were times when, like ordinarily, we were off for at least 48 hours after being on for 24 hours. We'd go out to the missile sites for 24 hours at a time. That was our way of operating. And then we'd be off for at least 48 hours to recover before we had to go out again.
Now, did any of these people booze? Trying to deal with their anxiety, and would they booze during the 24 hours?
Oh yeah,
really.
Drinking was, very heavy among military young men. They drink
but I mean,
lot.
even
I learned to drink a lot. I had resisted drinking during high school when many of my peers were chipping in on buying a bottle and
you
drinking.
think the reason you got into it was to deal with the anxiety, or the?
I think that was part of it. Yeah.
And the herd mentality of, well, my coworkers are, so.
Yeah, part of it was the peer thing. But a big part, because I had resisted the peer thing earlier.
Right.
So, I wanted to go home.
Sure. Now, did any of your coworkers, did you keep in touch with any of them years later? Did any of them, to your knowledge, wake up to how evil what they were trained to do was?
I don't know of any that I knew,
see.
personally knew, that resisted. Now, after being trained, I was assigned to Lackland, I was trained at Lackland Air Force Base, but, and the missile training was Shepherd Air Force Base. And then it was, trying to think of the New Mexico base, the South Dakota base, where I was assigned, and actually was ready to launch missiles from South Dakota. For some reason, I can't think of the name of the base now.
I know, I forget things too.
But, we lived in a barracks on that base, and then when it was our turn, we were taken usually by bus to one of the missile sites to serve a 24-hour shift. And we would relieve another crew when we went out, so it was one crew relieving one crew. But on this particular morning, we were awakened earlier than usual to go out to the site. And they sent 2 launch crews out instead of the 1 launch crew. And
because?
They were expecting that it might
happen.
It might happen, and they wanted to make sure they had plenty of qualified people out there
assassins.
at the site. Yeah, sack killers.
That's right.
And we had a briefing. They woke us up early, and we went for the briefing. And, of course, right away we knew something was wrong and that they were getting us up early and giving us this briefing earlier than normal. So we learned about the Soviet missiles that, at the time we thought one was already there, but it wasn't armed yet. And then there were at least one other missile headed that way, and the U.S. was going to intercept. And so anyway, we thought that there's a strong chance that we're going to get the order.
Did you ever tell after that your mother or anybody in your family or close friends back in Chicago about how close a Holocaust was?
I think I did. I don't think I filled them in on all of the details, but I think I mentioned that this was a high alert time and that we had thought we would get the order and so on, and that it was so great that Kennedy and Khrushchev had the wisdom to not follow the advice they were getting and to talk it out. I'm afraid that nowadays there may not be that chance because of AI, this artificial intelligence. Like I said, as far as the, I guess they call them logarithms and so on, those were being met. Everything that we had been taught meant that, yeah, we should launch, you know. And it was the wisdom of two people talking
Kennedy and Khrushchev.
that, yes,
yeah.
that made the difference. And I fear that nowadays that, you know, this artificial intelligence
Oh, yeah.
might
That's right.
be in charge,
Yeah.
and without any human interaction,
That's right.
might launch missiles.
Well, my favorite quote from Albert Einstein was, he said, more and more I've come to value charity and love of others above everything else. All our lauded technological progress, our very civilization, is like an axe in the hand of a pathological criminal. Powerful.
Yes, indeed. So I did my 4 years. I had joined the Air Force to see the world.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I wanted to do, was to travel. I especially wanted to go to Spain.
Oh, really?
Because I had taken Spanish while in
Okay.
high school.
All right.
And my Spanish teacher had showed all these photos, lovely photos
yeah.
of Spain,
Yeah.
and played music
Right.
from Spain, all these recordings of
Right.
the music. And it developed a craving in me to
Sure.
visit Spain. And then another place I wanted to go was Japan. And I can't remember the details now of why Japan, but that was one of the two places.
And you saw them both? You saw them both? Oh,
No.
neither
in
one.
the 4 years, I
Okay.
got to see Texas and South Dakota.
Oh.
So after 4 years, I got out. Although they wanted me, they had trained me, you know,
Right,
for this
right.
Titan missile crew. So they wanted me to re-enlist. So they offered me a sizable bonus to re-enlist.
Was your conscience waking up then?
No,
Oh, okay.
it was, I didn't get what I wanted, so
Oh,
I want to
I see.
get out of here, you know. And they wouldn't promise retraining, because I didn't particularly like being in a dirty, noisy
No.
powerhouse. The noise was terrible, and
Oh, my.
I keep saying I need to file a claim with the VA now.
Because you're hard
about
of hearing.
my hearing, yeah. The VA did pay for my expensive hearing aids. I have top of the line hearing aids,
Right.
so that's good. But I keep saying I should file a claim to get paid disability.
True.
But they wouldn't promise retraining. They wouldn't promise reassigning, but they kept offering me more money. I'd say no, and so they'd increase the
Really?
amount. I'd say no, and they kept offering more and more money, but it wasn't enough to keep me in. So I got out after the 4 years, and I'm glad that I did. The benefits have been good. You know, I did go to college and get a BS degree on the GI Bill, which was better than the GI Bill that they have now.
Oh, really?
Where guys ahead of time have to decide that they want to go to school afterwards.
Oh.
So they have to sign up for it while they're still in service. I think they can still do it after they get out, but it's more difficult. It's best if while they're in that they decide, you know. And then I believe that a portion of the money set aside for the GI Bill actually comes directly from the service
Oh.
person that that they're paying into a
Oh,
fund
I see.
that is then, and I'm not sure how many times it's matched by the government, and then that money is later used for schooling. So, you know, it's still good, you know, for people who don't serve. It, you know, it's better than what they have. But we try to let young people know that, well, there are other options.
Right.
There are scholarships and grants, loans to go to school, so you don't necessarily have to join the military.
No. You brought many articles that you've written, and share a couple if you want to.
Well, I'll read these 5 paragraphs that I have thought about titling what I call my memoirs.
Okay.
This would be the title.
Okay.
My Life in Bits and Pieces. And I'm not sure how to pronounce Azigus.
I don't know either.
Azigus.
What does it mean?
Anyway, the title is My Life in Bits and Pieces. Azigus, the life, times, trials, and passions of Charles Ray Powell.
Huh.
Azigus means unmatched, not being paired, one of a kind, without a mate.
Huh.
It was chosen for the title of my biography because I've always felt different, misunderstood, and alone. It's difficult to explain because I find much with which to identify in most people.
Right.
I get along with almost everybody. I have a knack for seeking, finding, and exploiting common ground. My social skills are superb, and when I use them, I find links with even my most ardent opponents.
Right.
I'm blessed to have my mother alive and mainly healthy. This was back then. I talk to her at least once a week and an average 2 visits per year. I also keep in touch with 2 loving sisters, a daughter, 2 grandsons, in-laws, and even my ex-wife. I have true friendships, some of which I've maintained for more than 40 years. Because of my many varied interests, I also have strong bonds with many colleagues and acquaintances. I'm interested in movies, plays, music, travel, the environment, wildlife, history, world peace, labor issues, and civil liberties. However, despite the friendships I hold dearly, despite all the bonds I have with others that also seek to save the world, I'm not entirely understood. I'm still not completely accepted. I'm not really one of them. I remain alone. Currently, these feelings of alienation are at least partly due to my advancing age, clinical depression, employment dissatisfaction, that was back then, lack of a love relationship, and being hundreds of miles from family.
When did you write it? How many years ago?
I'm thinking that this was actually written in 2019.
So 5 years ago.
Yeah.
That is very, very insightful on many levels. You really opened your life and your heart in that.
Yeah. This is a piece that I think I probably wrote more recently than that. I'm not sure.
Uh-huh.
I should date stuff.
That's right.
It's titled, When I Say I'm a Veteran for Peace. When I say I'm a veteran for peace, I mean I'm a proud member of the international organization founded in 1985. When I say I'm a veteran for peace, I mean I'm opposed to the use of weapons and violence to settle disputes. When I say I'm a veteran for peace, I mean I'm for diplomacy, negotiation, and peaceful conflict resolution. When I say I'm a veteran for peace, I mean I opposed the American wars on Vietnam, Grenada, Nicaragua, Panama, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria. When I say I'm a veteran for peace, I mean I now realize during the Cold War, while I was in the Air Force, I should have refused to be a part of the Titan Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Launch Crew.
Excellent, excellent. I strongly compliment you on your stand of conscience.
Yeah, and after I did get out, which was in 1965, there was still a lot going on, between the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And my first anti-war demonstration was in 1968 in Pocatello, Idaho.
Really?
I was living in Brigham City, Utah at the time, and Utah makes it hard to drink. And
Right.
by then, I had become quite the drinker and
Right.
loved drinking. And so when I had the time off, I would flee Utah
Oh,
because there you had to buy bottles from state liquor stores.
yeah. Oh, really? Oh.
And if you were going to drink with someone else that drank something different, then it might mean buying 2 bottles or more, order. And then you would take your bottle to a club where they charged you for a setup, which included the glasses and ice and the mixer for the drinks. So Utah made it somewhat difficult to drink. You could still do it, but it was harder. So I discovered Idaho, which wasn't that far away.
Right.
And they didn't have those kind of rules.
Right,
It was
right.
a lot easier
Yeah.
to go to a club and buy a drink.
Yeah.
So I would go to Pocatello. And one weekend while in Pocatello, Idaho, I came across a demonstration at
Really?
the federal building in Pocatello
Against the Vietnam
against
War.
the Vietnam War. And I had read Dr. Spock's book on Vietnam. I don't know if you read it or
No,
were
I
familiar
didn't.
with it or not. But that wasn't the only thing I had read. While
Right.
in the Air Force, I had read Dr. Spock's book, and among other things. And I, through thinking, reasoning,
yes.
I had concluded that the U.S. shouldn't
That's
be
right.
doing what they're doing.
That's right.
And anyway, I hadn't done much about it. I think maybe I had written a letter or two before that. But this was my first time participating in a demonstration, was downtown Pocatello, Idaho. And when I revealed that I was a Air Force veteran,
Yeah.
they were so pleased
Oh,
to
yeah.
have me
Oh, yeah.
as a part of their group.
Did you
and-
speak there?
No, not. I just talked to people around
see.
me, but I don't think I made a speech
Right.
to the whole group. I don't remember doing that. No. But later, there were all these stories about how the anti-war people had disrespected
Right.
U.S. military veterans.
And you
And-
knew that wasn't true in your case.
Well, yeah, I don't doubt that there was probably some of that.
Sure, sure.
But I don't think it was to the extent that it was preached to people.
That's right. That's
that
right.
all this spitting that occurred. That I'm sure that it wasn't nearly as widespread as they would have had us believe, because like I said, when they found out I was a veteran, they saw me as a hero.
Sure.
And welcomed me as being a part of
Right.
the anti-war movement. And then later, while I was in the Air Force, I took college classes in my spare time.
Uh-huh.
And usually it was 1 or 2 classes at a time. And many of those classes were from Black Hills State, which is in Spearfish, South Dakota. And they made it easy because they gave extension courses on the air base in Rapid City. So most of the hours I had accrued were from Black Hills State. So when I decided to go to school full time, I chose Black Hills State to go. And there I quickly joined in with the anti-war people.
Good.
And we called ourselves People for Social Improvement. And our big issue was anti-war,
Right.
but we also were opposed to discrimination
Good.
that was occurring in Rapid City. Black airmen faced discrimination, although it wasn't as harsh as in the South. Like usually they would say, "We're all filled up. We don't have an apartment to rent to you."
Yeah.
And if you brought an ad with you from today's paper, they'd say, "Oh, that was printed after we had already rented," and so on.
Lies,
So
lies,
they were
lies.
smiling and talking with you about, asking about your health and talking to you about the weather and all
yet
that.
they knew from the beginning they wouldn't wouldn't rent to you.
Right, yeah. So as a result of that, airmen at the Air Force Base, I keep wanting to say Kirtland, but that's here, isn't it?
Right.
Huh, I don't know why I can't think of it. But Black airmen
Organized or-
started a chapter of the NAACP.
Ah, good.
And most of the members were airmen from the base. And at about the same time, and not knowing of each other at the time, some of the white citizens in Rapid City formed what they named the Black Hills Civil Rights Committee.
Oh, good.
And then, of course, later we learned of each other.
Right.
And we joined forces, and
Wonderful.
members of the NAACP joined the Civil Rights Committee, and members of the Civil Rights Committee joined the NAACP. Yeah. And I still, for years, I kept in touch with some of the people I met through that, that work and those organizations. I haven't been communicating very much lately.
How do you deal with your depression?
Um, I sleep a lot. And luckily, I'm a good sleeper.
Right.
I can sleep almost any time. Usually, I can get to sleep in less than 3 minutes.
Really?
And
Oh.
if something wakes me up, I have no trouble getting back
Has
to
it
sleep.
always been that way?
I think so.
see.
Even as a kid, I slept a lot and I dreamed a lot, and I remembered my dreams.
Still?
And that was part of the great pleasure
Well,
of
sure.
sleeping.
Still
But
dream a
now
lot?
I don't. For the
Dream.
most part, I don't remember my dreams
Right,
nowadays,
right.
and that bothers me. And when I do remember something that I dreamed, usually it doesn't make any sense. It's something, really crazy.
And I suppose some of your friends have no idea, unless you've told them, that you struggle with depression.
Right.
Because
Right.
you're such a committed activist, go so many places, speak so
Right.
much.
Yeah. Now, for a while, as a result of counseling with a psychologist, and even sometimes psychiatrists, I found out about group counseling.
Oh, okay.
And I found that a lot more helpful
Oh, really?
than counseling with the professional,
Oh.
where I'm the poor,
Right, right.
depressed individual,
Right.
and they're the all-knowing
Oh, yes.
doctor.
And I suppose they seldom, if ever, tell you their own struggles.
Right,
You know,
right,
it's
exactly.
a one-way street.
Exactly, yeah.
yeah.
But I discovered the group counseling where, you're
Yeah.
sharing that time.
Do you go to
with-
that now?
I don't. I keep thinking I should start again. Yeah. I ended up joining a group. I can't think of the title of the group, but it's a group for
Here?
Yes, here in Albuquerque. It's a group for people who are suffering from depression or their loved ones. They have someone close to them that's suffering from depression. And
How do you recognize someone that has depression? I mean, from your own experience, are there any signs that of someone being depressed that you, besides sleeping a lot?
Yeah, well, they can be inconsistent, in their moods, where some days,
Right.
like, what do they call it? Manic depression,
Right.
I guess,
Right. Or bipolar?
is what many people suffer from.
Yeah.
Now, I never had the manic part of it.
Oh, really?
I always suffered the
Yeah,
negative without
see.
getting those up days. But I'm thankful for the days where I wasn't feeling at the very bottom.
Exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, I wouldn't describe it as being manic like what some people go through. But yeah, for years I went to this group and shared time talking about my personal struggles
Sure.
and listening to
Right.
theirs. And yeah, they do still exist, this group. And so I probably will go back and start attending those sessions again. Yeah.
Any other article that you want to read to us?
Well, here's one that is titled, "What is RTW?" The RTW, the right to work for less, the right to work without being able to fully care for your family, the right to work 2 or more jobs, the right to work and collect food stamps or eat at soup kitchens and benefit from donated groceries and clothing, the right to work without guaranteed hours, the right to work without paid vacations, the right to work without sick leave. In other words, the right to work without fairness, dignity, or any other rights. The RTW, the right to work without a union.
Powerful.
And there are some states that, have those laws that makes it hard for unions to operate because...
Does New Mexico?
No, we've always been able to defeat right to work, but there's still quite a struggle for labor.
Sure.
Here. Yeah, and although I did belong to other unions in other jobs, my main, I worked for the U.S. Postal Service.
Many years, right?
Longer than any other job.
How many years?
18 years, which surprised me, when I realized I'd stayed that long. And the only way I can explain it is that I, most of the time, was engaged in struggles with management. And I think that distracted me from coming up with an exit plan.
Oh.
So I ended up staying. And it turned out well because I get a good pension in addition to my Social Security. I get a good pension. And between the two, financially, I do about as well as I did when I was working. Although when I was working, I could get all the overtime I wanted.
And you sorted mail? You sorted mail? Or?
Yes, I started off as a mail handler, which are the guys that load and unload trucks. And we're the ones that dump the mail sacks and trays and buckets and all of that.
Right.
And we do rough sorting. The clerks, do the final, much of the final sorting. And then, of course, the carriers, they finalize their own route and so on.
We're almost at the end of the hour program. And tell people again how to get a hold of you if they want to join Veterans for Peace or have you come speak to a class or whatever.
Okay, yes. I'm Charles Powell, Powell, and my number is 505-271-9274. I guess it's on the screen.
Oh, is it? Okay. All right. Fine.
Yeah. And we meet once a month. When we meet in person, it's at the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice, which is on Silver and Harvard, just south of the university. In recent months, we've only been meeting on Zoom. So if you're interested, you can call me or you can write to Veterans for Peace at the Peace Center, 202 Harvard Drive, Southeast, 87106. You can write there and we can help you join. Our basic annual membership, I believe, is $40 annually. And then our local does not charge a local membership.
I see.
So if you join the national and you live in our area, we accept you as a member of our chapter.
Good. Well, I thank you so much, Charles, for being my guest today and for opening your heart and your life to us. And Charles Powell, my longtime friend, and one of my 6 pallbearers. Thank you.